Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm Deborah D'Angelo, and I am a Promise presenter here in Connecticut, and I'm going to help you walk through the story arc for the Say Something program. Before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone has viewed the student presentation of Say Something. It's really important that you are able to see what the program looks like before we step into and break down this training into each of the chapters that are part of the story arc. So if you have not, pause this training or stop it here and then go back and watch the student presentation, please, and join us back again. If you've already viewed it, once again, welcome. Thank you for being here. I am going to step you through each of the 5 chapters that make up the Say Something story arc. And the reason we use a story arc is it helps us to really tell the story from start to finish. And by taking all of the slides in the slide deck and compartmentalizing them into each of the chapters, it will help you to better understand, and it will help you to have more of a flow, which is going to help to get the message of Say Something across with more fluidity and really help take that story from start to finish, which is what the hope was for all of the information involved. So let's get started here. The first chapter of the story arc for Say Something is the welcome and the introduction. So as you had seen from the student presentation, you are going to do a minor introduction, or rather a small introduction, with the history of Sandy Hook. And hang on, I'm having a little technical difficulty here. There we go. You're going to start with an introduction about Sandy Hook and your connection to it, your passion as to why you want to be involved with spreading the wonderful messages. We start off with a brief introduction and move right into the video that conveys the importance of doing prevention work. It shows those clips from all across the country of the violence and the threats and the suicides that are occurring throughout the country, kind of giving cause for the need to have a prevention program. You also want to be building rapport with your audience. So talking with them about why this is important to you, why you're involved, and what your connection is to the message, to Sandy Hook Promise. And then we're going to be walking into the stats that are brought up that we take a look at. As you recall from seeing the students, you're going to be going through actually for chapter 1, slides 1 through 20. So I'm going to be clicking through some of them. And we talk here about, in talking with students, how they all had some kind of comment about someone knowing that this was going to happen. And we want to ask the question and have them start to think about why someone wouldn't say something. We then discuss what we're hoping they will learn today. And we go through the easy steps that are involved, our 3 steps: looking for warning signs, signals, and threats, acting immediately, and then saying something to a trusted adult. We reassure them that schools are safe so that we're not building up fear by seeing all of those clips and talking about different stats, and letting them know that while they're safe, nobody is immune. And then we get into some more of that credibility piece where we're talking about some pretty large numbers. And we have several here up on the screen to kind of show them that this is not a one-time deal. This is not a one and done. These are threats and victimizations that are happening all across the country in numbers that are very, very large. And we then give them some numbers that are a little more easy to understand. 1 in 3, we talk about being sad. We talk about feeling hopeless. We talk about students maybe feeling unsafe. And we can connect with the students and make it more personal by utilizing the information of the area that they live in, using the size of their school to kind of report, gee, that you would need this many of your school to represent that million students or more than 1 million students that did not go to school for one day, or make it personal right there in the audience and use the 1 in 3 by saying to them something along the lines of, that's yourself and the person to your left and the person to your right. One of the 3 of you may report feeling sad or hopeless for more than 2 weeks in the last 12 months. So you're trying to build that rapport and make the connection, show them the importance and the need, and then bringing them in and letting the students know that there are steps that they can take, things that they themselves can do to prevent the violence, to prevent the threats and the suicides. We take this very heavy material and now we jump into that there's some good news. There's good news that we learned, and we want to pass what we've learned on. And that has to do with ways that we have been given information prior to these tragedies occurring, and how it happens in social media, and how there's a planning period for each of them, and how there are warning signs 70% of the time for people who complete an actual suicide. And then it's spelled out on this slide, where we want to show them what we'd like to teach them, which you'll notice are our 3 easy steps. Look for warning signs, signals, and threats. Act immediately, take it seriously, and to say something to a trusted adult. And by teaching them that, they'll be able to help reduce violence and create a safer community, not only for themselves, but for their whole school community, for their town. I often go into their state, and the ripple effect takes it across the country. So that's chapter 1. Again, we're kind of building the story, letting them know the reason behind the need, building rapport with the students, showing them the stats to let them know there really is need for this, because too many times people think, not in my community. And that's the first thing that we hear when a tragedy does strike. We never thought it would happen here. So making that connection. And now we're going to move into each of the 3 steps, which become chapters of their own. So we are now on to the next chapter, which is chapter 2, looking for warning signs, signals, and threats. Oh, sorry. Again, a little technical difficulty here. There we go. Now, we can't ask students to look for warning signs if they don't know what they are. So within this story arc for chapter 2, we want students to know how to recognize signs and signals of a potential threat, especially on social media. And in order to do that, they need to understand that working definition. So we give that to them. What is a warning sign? And I like to read the definition right to them. They've got it in front of them, but to read them the definition. And then we give them some examples of what that might look like. And you don't have to read each and every one of them, as you saw from the student presentation, but to just give them a flavor of what some of these might be. Because many times our students are so literal that they need some examples, and they may think that some of these are not really falling under that definition of a warning sign or a threat. And this will help them to see what some of those behaviors look like. We then go into a warning signal. And this might be a little harder for them to understand. So giving an example before you get into the next slide that lists other examples. And as you saw in the student's presentation, I like to use a couple examples in and around researching suicide and how that could very well have something to do with a project they're doing in school, or it could be because a person is actually experiencing some feelings or some thoughts about attempting suicide. And ours is not to know why a student is doing it, but to have our students be aware that these are signals. Something's different, something's not what we know our friend to be. And so we're trying to notice those things. So we're looking for those warning signs, those signals, and those threats. And just as was the case with the warning signs, here are some examples of some signals. So this is still part of that chapter. And again, a threat is explained and some threats are given. Also in chapter 2, we're talking about where you can find these signs. So students now know what they look like, what signs, signals, and threats look like, and now we want them to start thinking about where we can find them. And noted earlier in chapter 1, it gave the stats that social media is the primary place we're finding them. And then it talks about the lunchroom and the classroom. This particular slide helps students to see that sometimes those warning signs, signals, and threats are not just spoken. They're not just photos. They come in many different forms, and they're using many different social medias, even more than that may be listed up on this screen. And here is a slide that lists actual tweets and texts that were sent. And I like to pay attention to the Valencia High School, which you'll notice is at the bottom center to the left-hand side of the screen. And I ask students to imagine waking up in the morning and grabbing their phone to see who posted what the night before and seeing this tweet, but their name, their school name is in place of Valencia. And so their high school has been nominated to be shot up first. And what do they do with that information? On this particular slide, we're giving the program a pat on the back, if you will, because while Say Something was designed to help reduce violence, threats, and suicide, it's also helped other areas by teaching our students to recognize changes in their friends, by teaching them to notice some of these behaviors or comments that might indicate a problem. They have also been able to step forward and get help for students who are dealing with other problems, such as eating disorders, such as being bullied, maybe substance abuse or addiction problems. And so it has brought on many more benefits than just a reduction in violence. We're moving on to chapter 3, and that would be step 2 in our 3-step action, which is act immediately and take it seriously. So the slides in chapter 2 go from 21 up to 32, for those of you who are taking notes on that. And the first question that we're asking or posing to the students is, when should you act? Well, just as it states in the step, it's immediately. Immediately you seek help. And while that seems very simple, again, giving the students an example of a school vacation. And if they hear something on a Friday night, maybe with a long weekend off, or even a week, or when we're talking about winter break, sometimes we're looking at 9 or 10 days off of school. So if they hear of a threat or see a threat on a Friday night at a function right as their winter break begins, when do they act with that? Do they wait until they get home? Do they wait until they get back to school? And we want to emphasize that they need to act immediately and take each one of them seriously. We also want the students to know that we understand it's hard to act immediately. And we also understand that there are things that might delay us from doing so. And some examples on this slide are given that others have shared were the reasons behind their not being able to act immediately. So just as was in the video at the beginning of the student presentation, it lists things like we thought maybe someone was too young, or if they were going to do something, they wouldn't announce it publicly. Maybe they were just blowing off some steam. Maybe they just wanted attention. And then there's the bystander effect of, I thought someone else would do it. It's not my business. So we want students to understand, just like the 6th grader in the video who they were announcing her funeral, the girl who took her life due to bullying. Nobody thought a 6th grader was capable of something that serious. There is no entry age. People often announce their planned actions, so we really shouldn't be considering it just blowing off steam. And we want them to say something to a trusted adult because we want the experts to be able to assess the sign, the signal, or the threat, because most of us are not equipped to do that. We are equipped to recognize when they're happening, but we need the expert to be able to tend to the level of lethality or validity of that sign, signal, or threat. But we want to really emphasize that our students are old enough to be recognizing these signs, signals, and threats, and we want them to be an upstander, to be participating in their life, not just standing by and watching it from the sidelines. So we give the students a moment to think about what might cause them to stop and not say something immediately. And on this particular screen, this one comes up a lot. Students are very concerned about being shunned or put out of a group, being alienated, maybe getting beat up. They use that phrase, snitches get stitches. And so we talk about that concern there because nobody wants to rat on a friend or be a tattletale. And helping them to understand that Sandy Hook Promise has taken this very real thing into consideration for the training, we have then spelled out the difference between saying something and telling on someone. And it's, I think, really important to give this page a lot of emphasis. Actually reading and explaining to them that saying something is getting someone help. This is a friend of yours that you may have noticed a change in their behavior, a change in how they are thinking and feeling and acting and dressing, something that has signified to you that there's something going on in their life that they might not be able to handle on their own. And so saying something is getting someone help for their safety, for their well-being. And it's to protect yourself and from others from harm. You wanting to help a friend. Telling on someone, on the other hand, is that you're trying to get them in trouble. You're purposely trying to bring negative light on them for your own gain. So there's a very big difference between saying something and snitching or being a rat. And there are still going to be some naysayers out there, even with that explanation. And so for those students, we want to really emphasize that you could be saving someone's life. When you do not act, you risk losing a friend, a classmate, a whole class full. and that there are people who really do want help, but they don't know how to get it because they are not themselves. They're not thinking as clearly. It's why a friend noticed they may need some help. And so we really need students helping students. All right, so we've got that chapter done and the first two steps. And now we're on to chapter 4, which is say something to a trusted adult. And say something to a trusted adult, chapter 4, goes from slide 33 to slide 39. So within this part of the story arc, we're going to give examples of trusted adults. We're going to talk about how to have a conversation and how to report a threat. And when you're in a school setting, students are aware of the principal. They're aware of the math teacher. They're aware many times of the secretary or the nurse. But there are a lot of times that they don't realize who a trusted adult could be. And so we're going to get into helping them understand how to find their trusted adult, because there is no door that says trusted adult, just like the principal's door says principal on it, or the nurse's door says nurse. When we want our students to go and talk to someone, we need them to understand that if there is an immediate life-threatening situation, that they must follow their school steps or dial 911 and then seek a trusted adult for assistance. 911 and medical emergencies take precedence to going to find someone to talk to. We need to absolutely have them act first there. But when we get into who our trusted adult is, I like students to understand that it's whomever they feel comfortable with. It doesn't have to be the guidance counselor, the school counselor, the school psychologist, or the school social worker. There's a whole host of people. It could be teachers. It could be the resource officer in the school. It could be the nurse, the custodian, the lunch lady. It could be anyone within the school setting. Outside of the school setting, they could have religious leaders, coaches, mentors. There is a whole host. And so as you're giving some examples, you can quickly flip through those slide pages and land on this page, letting them know that their parents are their first supports. That should be their first go-to. And by parents, we're talking about whomever they live with. That could be grandparents, aunts and uncles, foster parents, whomever it happens to be. The person they live with are their number one trusted adult. But I always tell my students, you need at least two. One during the school day, and one when you're not in school. Reminding them, as we discussed in the last chapter, that if they're at a party and a vacation is beginning and they're not coming back to school, they need to act immediately. They can't really contact a teacher. They won't be in school the next day. So they need to have someone they can go to during the school day, as well as when they're not in school. And so to think for a moment about who their trusted adult may be, and to put that contact in their social media, be it their email, their phone, their Twitter account, whoever it happens to be, save that contact information so that they know how to reach their trusted adult when an emergency may hit. So in addition to knowing who our trusted adult is, we have to be able to have a conversation with them, which is not always easy. And I ask the students, who has ever had to deliver bad news to their parent about a test score that maybe they didn't do so well on because they chose not to study? Many hands go up. And we remember how hard it is to give that piece of information. So calling your parent to say, that you're concerned because you're at your best friend's house and they just showed you their father's gun. That's going to be even harder to have a conversation about. So we tell our students to bring any information they have. That phrase, a picture speaks 1,000 words, is a good example here, because you may have a photo or a text message or a tweet that the student can show to their trusted adult, and then they won't have to explain as much. They won't have to remember as many details. So we tell the students to gather up any information that they have, write down what you heard so you don't have to try to remember later on, because while you're nervous or concerned or scared for your friend, it's hard to remember some of those details. Now, how do we have that conversation once we've gathered up all this information? Well, just as we have the 3 steps for say something, there are 3 steps to have a conversation. And I model it for the students first. And we give the teacher a name, common name, Mrs. Smith, and tell them that they need to really get that teacher's attention. To say, Mrs. Smith, I need to talk to you about Joey. I've been noticing some changes in him, almost warning signs, and I need your help to get him some help. It's that simple. Now, Mrs. Smith may not have all the answers, but she'll know who to turn to within the school setting to be there. And that trusted adult will most certainly be there to help you. So again, picking the person that you know that would be there to support you no matter what, knowing their contact information, and then having the conversation. So that takes us through the 3 steps, and it takes us through the first 4 chapters of our 5-chapter story arc. And now we're on to chapter 5, which is the conclusion. And the slides for chapter 5 are from slide number 40 up to 52. And here is where we remind the students to be more aware, to look out for each other, to be upstanders. We explain to them that they are the eyes and the ears of our school. They are in places where the adults can't be or are not. They see things that others don't see. We are helping them to understand that they can be part of the solution. They can reduce violence. They can reduce threats. We're empowering them once again to let them know that they can be the change. And then we give some proof. And these are such a small number of examples. And as promised presenters, you will learn, you will see, you will hear of other proof, and you'll have your own story that gives more credibility that you can add to this. The very first time I presented, the student in our school went up to our student resource officer when it was over and showed the police officer his phone where he had posted a picture of himself holding 2 guns. And the student wasn't suspended. The student didn't get detention. He was not arrested. The resource officer spoke with him privately and learned why he posted that and found out that he was needing some supports in another area, and they got him that help. So say something works, and it's the beauty and the simplicity allows students to really be able to utilize it at an age where so many things are complicated in their life, and this is 3 simple steps. So we ask the students, after empowering them one more time and helping them understand why we need them on board as part of the team to make a difference. And we ask the students if they're willing to take the pledge. And so on this screen, we do a callback, presenter saying it once, students repeating after, and we take the pledge together. I promise to look for warning signs, signals, and threats, to act immediately, take it seriously, to say something to a trusted adult, to help create a safer, healthier school. Now, there may be some students who are not comfortable and are not ready to take that pledge, and that's okay. Everybody in their own time. But if we reach just one student, you've done your job, and we've created or started that ripple effect to make change. So those are the chapters for the story arc that is Say Something. And I hope that helps you to prepare better to bring the message of Say Something. Thank you so much.